Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're taking a first look at a brand new Shadow Pokemon in the world of Pokemon Go, Shadow Serperior. We already know the regular Serperior is a top meta threat in the Open Great League, so I'm incredibly excited to see what the Shadow can do. Since the Open Great League obviously isn't available at the moment, I'm going to be doing some practice Open Great League battles with members of my Discord so we can see how this Pokemon performs. And before we start, I did do a little bit of research showing the matchups gained and lost when you run the regular versus when you run the Shadow. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and take a first look at Shadow Serperior. Hopping into the first match, picking up a very troublesome lead, leading Walrein into Shadow Claw, Alolan Sandslash. If this was the Powder Snow Alolan Sandslash, Walrein can actually do quite well there, because of course the Powder Snows would be double resisted. But since it's Shadow Claw, this is a bit of a problem. The Icicle Spear bait is going to be shielded up by the opponent. Opponent is going to be able to pressure my first shield, as they will go for the Drill Run. I have a tough call to make here. I decide to not double bait. I'm going to be full sending the Earthquake. It connects and down goes Sandslash. Opponent now going to look to send in Drifblim, and I'm very happy that I do have switch advantage here. I'm going to bring in Malamar. Opponent does make it to a Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball would inflict serious damage, but I think I can barely hang on. So I no shield. I successfully call the bait. That's a big call, as now I can fire off the foul play, pressure a shield from my opponent. They Icy Wind instantly, and I am letting Malamar go. Because Drifblim is back on their 5 cycle, which means I can now send in Shadow Serperior. Shadow Serperior hits a lot harder than the regular Serperior typically would. Frenzy Plant is going to KO Drifblim. In the back is Malamar. Now Malamar does have some pretty decent bulk to it. Let's see this Shadow Frenzy Plant. It absolutely rocks the Malamar. Malamar's only going to get to 1 move, so I have a very safe shield with Shadow Serperior. Get the Vine Whip down, and take the win. Bad lead in the next match, leading Walrein into Annihilate. I'm going to save switch into Malamar. Opponent is going to counter switch with a Drifblim. The fact that they're sending in Drifblim tells me they are pretty weak as a whole to Malamar. They will fire off an Icy Wind. I'm more than happy to let this go. I know from the previous battle, Icy Wind is not going to knock me out, and I do get a pretty nice farm down. Opponent, if they want to bring back in the Annihilate, they can get an energy head start, but the issue that they're going to have is even debuffed, a foul play does quite a bit of damage. So my opponent is going to commit the shield, and they will get the farm down. In comes Shadow Serperior. Shadow Serperior does have a lot more damage than the regular, but that does come with a trade-off. It's a lot glassier, so I'm going to be shielding up. In comes Galarian Corsola. Now this is going to be a true test of the damage output from Serperior, as Galarian Corsola is massively bulky, but here that Corsola honestly did not look bulky whatsoever, as it gets rocked by the Shadow Frenzy Plant. I do need to exit this matchup with energy, so what I'm going to do is I will fire off the Aerial Ace. Aerial Ace, not going to KO, but it will allow me to get a farm down. In comes Annihilate. Annihilate is going to be met with an Aerial Ace, and then I have to switch into the Walrein. I have to make an Icicle Spear before they get to the close combat, but it's a CMP tie, and Walrein's not going to win it. Close combat is going to KO. In comes Shadow Serperior. Shadow Serperior unfortunately does not get the move, and we move to the next game. In the next game, actually identical lead to the game before, leading into Annihilate. I save switch Malamar. Opponent is going to grab a shield with a Rage Fist before they send in Dunsparce. Dunsparce, I need 2 moves to knock out anyway, so I may as well go for the foul play. Foul play is shielded, so my opponent giving up a very early shield in this matchup. Drill Run, not going to knock out. I'm going to tank that and look to farm up to the back-to-back superpowers, as this way I can guarantee either grabbing my opponent's final shield or taking switch advantage, and honestly either one works pretty well for me. So I go for superpower number 2, they decide to let it go, fully sacrificing the Dunsparce, and Malamar was able to win switch. I'm going to send in Walrein as they bring in Annihilate, and my opponent makes a devastating catch, catching the Icicle Spear onto Shadow Feraligatr. That's just a great prediction from my opponent. As you can see from the time that these battles were done, I went out at midnight to get these new Pokemon. I hunted for about 2 hours. The best Shadow Serperior that I could find was a 1470 CP, so that's what I am using here. So throughout these battles, we're going to see some interesting plays by me, and just know that that's because it is like 3 in the morning as I'm recording this now. Opponent is going to aggressively switch in the Annihilate and fire off a Rage Fist, but this is what I saved my shield for. So I can shield up that damage, fire off the Aerial Ace, and I should be one off the next Aerial Ace as well. Could have farmed down the Feraligatr, but if I have the energy, I may as well throw it. So even though my opponent was able to make things quite scary in the mid game with a nice catch, we're able to take the win. Walrein versus Serperior. My opponent is running the non-Shadow Serperior. I farm up one extra and I will fire off the Icicle Spear. Icicle Spear is going to be no shielded. That does some pretty substantial damage. Here, to me, it feels like a pretty obvious bait. I decided to shield anyway, and of course it is going to be the Aerial Ace bait. That is unfortunate. I will go for the Icicle Spear. I feel like Walrein will be valuable later on, so I end up making a Frenzy Plant catch onto Malamar. Malamar is going to be answered with Shadow Drapion, and that's not what I'm hoping to see. But Drapion goes for an Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail, not a particularly threatening move. Malamar hangs on with 1 HP to make it to a superpower, and that does some very nice damage. So now I can bring in the Walrein. Walrein, unfortunately, will get outpaced here. Crunch will more or less knock me out. I survive on 1 HP, send in Serperior, and Serperior, I'm really going to need to have a type advantage in the back because I'm up energy, but I'm now down a shield. And in the back is Galarian Corsola, and unfortunately this is just not a winning endgame for me. I will fire off the Frenzy Plant. Again, that just does so much damage to Galarian Corsola. This battler mentioned after the fact they have a very good Galarian Corsola, so they were very surprised at that damage. But unfortunately, down a shield, we were just not winning that game. Walrein into Dunsparce. I'm going to safe switch into Malamar. And since they're staying in, I may as well go for the foul play. Whether they shield it or not, I'm very okay either way. They end up shielding, banking a ton of energy, and bringing in a non-Shadow Quagsire. Quagsire will go for the Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail does less than half of my remaining health. And that tells me that there's a chance, if they throw Aqua Tail number 2, that I can survive. It's going to be very, very close. So they will go for the move here. Aqua Tail does not KO, and I survive with a superpower. Superpower is going to connect. Down goes Quagsire, and I get switch advantage. In comes Dunsparce, getting the free rollout, and now I can send in Shadow Serperior. Shadow Serperior, of course, hits way harder, but in matchups like against Dunsparce, the Rock Slides will add up a lot faster as a result of your lowered defense. So 2 Rock Slides, and Serperior is now pretty low, whereas a regular non-Shadow Serperior could pretty comfortably tank 3 Rock Slides. Shadow Frenzy Plant is going to be shielded. Opponent switches out. Their final Pokemon is Jumpluff. I'm a bit surprised that they didn't answer the Malamar with the Jumpluff, but I guess they wanted to try and preserve the Jumpluff for a potential second target in the back, and in this instance, flipping switch in the mid game just proved to be absolutely everything for me. In comes the Dunsparce. They're going to throw energy, and I'm so confident that Shadow Frenzy Plant is KOing that I just let it go. I'm going for the 2 shield flex here with Shadow Serperior. Frenzy Plant knocks out Dunsparce, and that's a good game. Good lead in the next match, leading Walrein into Moltres. Opponent safe switches into Drapion, and Drapion is not a good Pokemon for my backline to see. So already my Walrein has been effectively overloaded. My Walrein needs to KO both the Drapion and the Moltres, and while Walrein can do some truly wonderful things, I don't think Walrein's going to be able to 1v2. Tough call to make. I decided I didn't want to go down shields, so I will end up letting that go and going for a foul play right before my opponent is able to make an Aqua Tail. Foul play, of course, resisted, but will still knock out. If I can make 2 superpowers versus the Moltres, I should be in a pretty good position. In comes the Moltres. It's going to be close, and I realize that I cannot get there. I'm very close to 2 superpowers, but not close enough, and the Sucker Punch will KO. In comes Walrein. Walrein, I have to shield here. Ancient Power might not KO, but a Brave Bird definitely will. In the back is Toxapex, and unfortunately Shadow Serperior just didn't have anywhere to run. However, if I'm able to grab a shield with this bait, maybe there is a chance. I send in Shadow Serperior. I know Frenzy Plant is going to do a lot of damage. Toxapex is very, very bulky. That's why people run it, but I'm going to have a pretty hard-hitting charge move headed its way. So I go for the Frenzy Plant. That is going to connect, getting them into the red health, and now I'm going for Frenzy Plant number 2. This Frenzy Plant, they have to shield or they will get KO'd. Can they get the farm down? They switch into the Moltres, and unfortunately, I do not get the damage registration error. My only way to win the game is farm down, and I can't do that. If I got that last second Aerial Ace, that was a win, but unfortunately, I did not. Hopping into the next match, leading Walrein into Wigglytuff, and I believe this is the match where you can really tell that it's 3 a.m. They go for the Icicle Spear, they switch into Dugong, and I just completely fall for it, and I throw the Icicle Spear. That is so unfortunate. Oh my goodness. Watching it back, my heart hurts. Oh man, I should not let them get that catch. Icy Wind is going to connect. I've sent in Malamar because Malamar, at the very least, is taking neutral damage, whereas Shadow Serperior, of course, would take super effective. I believe that even debuffed a Foul Play will be able to knock out here, so I go for the Foul Play. Opponent is going to end up shielding the Dugong, aggressive switch back into the Wigglytuff, and I mean, there's nothing I can really do there. My switch clock wasn't up, so I just get farmed. In comes the Walrein. I believe a Swift will be able to knock out here. Opponent running Disarming Voice on the Wigglytuff, and now I send in Shadow Serperior. Shadow Serperior is going to get a full farm down. I'm expecting they're going to bring in the Dugong and try and Icy Wind me, so I go for the Aerial Ace, and they brought in a Gastrodon. The good news is, I'm probably going to win. The bad news is, I just Aerial Ace the Gastrodon. Definitely not an ideal play by any stretch of the imagination, but Shadow Serperior is going to get the full Vine Whip farm down, and there's just no way for the Gastrodon to win the game. I go for the Frenzy Plant. They're just going to let it through, acknowledging that the game has concluded. Tough lead in the next match, Walrein versus Shadow Feraligatr. Shadow Feraligatr, obviously I would love to have aligned against the Serperior, but against Walrein, this is where things do get very uncomfortable. Hydro is going to land. I build up to the Earthquake, and I'm baiting with the Icicle Spear. Earthquake does do a lot of damage, but my opponent, Stone Cold, they call the bait, and that is really unfortunate. I am going to commit the shield, look to overfarm quite a bit, and see what they want to do. They're actually going to save switch into Galarian Corsola, and I will respond with the Malamar. In hindsight, maybe I should have gone with the Shadow Serperior, acknowledging the fact that it's unlikely that my opponent would be triple weak to the Shadow Serperior, but in the moment, I was just happy that Malamar was going to have a target. I banked a ton of energy, so that way, if my opponent actually is weak to Walrein in the back, then I will have coverage for that situation. I let Malamar go, I send in Serperior, opponent is going to aggressively switch out, and it's Drapion in the back. And the problem for me is this is actually a regular Drapion, which makes it a lot worse. If it was the Shadow, I think honestly I might be okay here, just because the Shadow takes a lot more damage. But it's the regular Drapion, which is worse overall, but in this one particular instance is going to be better for my opponent, as now there's just not a way for me to win this game. Feraligatr's too close to a move, and Drapion, it's actually running Sludge Bomb, so this game is over. I will go for the Aerial Ace to end up catching on Feraligatr, but catch or not, this was just over. There was just no way for me to win it, unfortunately. I guess maybe if I had put the Serperior onto the Corsola, but even then, it would have been a very tough battle. Hopping into the final match, Walrein versus Shadow Gallade. That's not a good lead, so I'm going to save switch to Malamar. The good news for Malamar is Psycho Cuts are doing nothing. The bad news is a close combat would be devastating, so I will commit the shield, and my opponent emptying the Spice Cabinet as Shadow Gyarados hits the field of play. Gyarados is really not going to appreciate the neutral consistency of Malamar. Malamar is just so overpoweringly strong in neutral matchups due to the fact that Psywave is an incredibly cracked move, and Foul Play and Superpower offer very nice coverage. Foul Play, it just cleanly KOs the Shadow Gyarados. They can't really afford to send in the Gallade, so instead, they're going to bring in Steelix, but Steelix is unable to get the farm down. Malamar makes the Superpower, that just does way too much damage, and now Shadow Serperior should be able to clean up in this endgame. They will fire off energy. I'm very fine tanking whatever they throw. It is going to be the Breaking Swipe, and now I get to go for the Frenzy Plant on Breaking Swipe number 2. Frenzy Plant is going to KO the Steelix. Back in comes Gallade, and with the amount of residual energy that I have, I'm just in a winning position. Aerial Ace is going to be shielded up. Gallade farming up quite a bit, and Gallade has to close combat to KO here. A Leaf Blade will not do it. I don't care that I'm a Shadow Pokemon. I'm still a Serperior, and Serperior has some pretty solid bulk to it. So I call the first Leaf Blade, shield the second as it is on the CMP tie, Aerial Ace, KO's Gallade, and that is a good game. And now that the battles have been completed, I think I can reach a pretty quick verdict on how I feel about Shadow Serperior. And that's that it's a pretty sick mon. We already know the regular Serperior is an amazing open Great League Pokemon, and the Shadow doesn't really change that fact. The Shadow does have some different matchups, as it does hit a bit harder, obviously due to being Shadow, and have less defense overall. But I do think it's going to be a pretty comparable side grade to the regular. However, I do have a pretty massive reservation about recommending building it, and that's that this is not the only new Pokemon coming out this month. In about a week's time, Corviknight is set to release. And as we know from when Skarmory was meta, the other Steel Flying types tend to make grass Pokemon very sad. So overall, I definitely think it's worth grabbing a good Shadow Serperior, because overall, I think it's a really nice Pokemon. I just wouldn't recommend building it at the current time, because it sounds like Corviknight, which arrives in a week, is going to be an absolute menace to the meta, and especially to Serperior. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy watching content like this, consider supporting the channel by leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is genuinely so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.